Question to the carrier.
Question to the carrier. Does the carrier yield?
I do.
He does.
Thank you, Representative. A couple of questions for you. Would a logger in the state of Oregon be defined under this bill as a green job?
Thank you for that question, Representative. Statutorily, green jobs are defined as jobs in industries that focus on energy efficiency, renewable energy, and improving the natural environment. So depending on the logger's job, they would indeed qualify.
Representative Wingard.
Follow up.
Further questions? Does the carrier yield?
I do.
He does.
Thank you, Representative. Would mill workers who are using wood products be considered green jobs?
Thank you, Representative. Provided that those jobs are enhancing the natural environment, they would indeed fall into this statute.
Follow up.
Further questions?
Thank you, Representative. Would contractors who use lumber products to build things, would they be considered green jobs?
Again, if those jobs are involved improving the natural environment, they would indeed fall under this statute.
Further follow-up.
Further questions? Does the carrier yield?
I do.
He does.
Thank you, Representative. Would workers at hydroelectric dams be considered green jobs?
Given that the definition refers to folks who work in the renewable energy industry, I believe they would.
Follow-up.
Further questions? Does the carrier yield?
I do.
He does.
Thank you, Representative. Would nuclear engineers be considered green jobs?
Insofar as nuclear energy is a renewable energy source, those folks would indeed fall under the statute.
Great. Follow-up.
Further questions? Does the carrier yield?
I do.
He does.
Would waste recyclers, good Representative, be considered a green job?
Again, provided that those jobs involve energy efficiency or renewable energy, they would indeed fall under the statute.
Representative Wingard.
Follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Further questions? Does the carrier yield?
I do.
He does.
Farmers growing food, ethanol, for instance, or biomass, or ranchers whose manure is being used to produce energy, would they also be considered green jobs?
Insofar as they're involved in the renewable energy industry, I believe they would fall under the statute. I should add also, and perhaps as a way to short-circuit this line of questioning, the Employment Department is engaged in a statewide study to identify green jobs. This, in fact, will be the second study in the country following Washington State's lead. That study is due to be completed on June 30th. The purpose of that study is to identify green jobs and where likely growth is likely to take place so that we can better match training opportunities to anticipated growth in high-wage, high-demand professions in the industry.
Final question.
Further questions? The carrier yield?
I do.
He does.
Good Representative, would fish farmers be considered green jobs?
Again, insofar as fish farmers would be defined as jobs that are improving the natural environment, they would indeed fall under the statute.
Representative Wingard.
To the bill.
To the bill.
I thank the Representative for his patience and for those answers and for the heads up that this definition is coming. I know myself and many of my colleagues will be eagerly waiting to see how green jobs are defined in the state of Oregon.
Representative Greenlick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A question to the carrier.
Question to the carrier. Does the carrier yield?
I do.
He does.
I was very much in favor of this bill until I got completely confused by the colloquy between you and the representative from Wilsonville. And it sounds to me like you put statements of legislative intent on the record guiding what might be considered green jobs, when I thought many of the things that were asked of you could only be green jobs in the very narrowest of constructions. And I think you put that construction in place, but could you clarify for me what the legislative intent is this in terms of essentially creating every job in the state a green job?
Thank you for that question, Representative. I used the statutorily defined definition of green jobs in my response, and if you recall, I nuanced my response to indicate that insofar as those jobs fell within that statutorily defined definition than they would be under this bill. Again, green jobs are defined primarily as jobs in industries that focus on energy efficiency, renewable energy, and improving the natural environment. I will say that if the Oregon Employment Department's study returns findings that are anything like those of Washington State, we'll determine that most green jobs are existing jobs in industries making the transition to a clean energy economy. Those would be jobs involving installation of solar panels, retrofitting buildings to make them more efficient, constructing transit lines, erecting wind farms, repairing hybrid cars, building green rooftops, planting trees, and the like. So many of these jobs are jobs that exist today but simply require additional training for folks to make the transition from a traditional economy to a green economy. And the purpose of this bill, again, is to ensure that we align and best tool our training opportunities to ensure that folks can take advantage of those opportunities going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to respond and thank the good representative from Chihuahua County to the bill for clarifying the answers to my questions, which I believe have become clear upon that exchange between the two of you. So what you have heard, colleagues, is that it is very likely that in the end, when the definition comes down, that loggers who replant their trees are not going to be considered green jobs. Mill workers using wood products in this state, making products from a renewable resource, timber, will not be considered green jobs. Workers at hydroelectric dams will not be considered green jobs. Nuclear engineers and the workers at nuclear power plants, waste recyclers, contractors building with lumber, farmers who are producing either ethanol or other biofuels, ranchers who may be shipping their manure or byproducts like that off for other purposes, fish farmers, and all the rest, not green jobs. Colleagues, as of this month, over 130,000 more Oregonians are unemployed than a year ago. I would submit that they really don't care, most of them, whether it's a green job. They'd like a job. And I am disappointed that in the 6 months that we've been in session, we've done very little, precious little, to address that need. Vote no.